Remember D for DIG stands for discovery. Let's have a quick look now at different methods or approaches to creating a good discovery structure in the organisation. So we'll create a matrix. We'll think about different ways of categorising approaches to discovery. On one side, we'll have the firm's awareness of customers' unsatisfied needs and put that against customers' awareness. So how much do we know? We, the firm, or the customers? That might seem a bit strange, but we'll come to it. So known or unknown? So maybe we as a firm do know what the customer's needs are, or maybe we don't. And let's see how we can think about different approaches. So first of all, the customer does know, is well aware of their needs and wants, but we don't. That's kind of simple. It's about listening and observing to what the customer wants. Knowing, doing. We both know. The customer knows, we know. Well, let's get on with it and implement the knowledge that we both know, that we share with the marketplace. If, however, we know, but the customers of the market don't, then what we need to do is educate. There's a learning requirement. We'll look into that a bit more in detail in future, in the next few minutes. And finally, nobody knows. We don't know, customers don't know. That's white space. Okay, now let's start with the upper left-hand quadrant, the knowing, doing, discovery path. Okay, so customers know, the firm knows, so what's the problem? Either there's lack of technology, we can't produce what the customer wants, or maybe it is possible, but we in the firm are apathetic or don't want to or are incapable of bringing it to fruition. And that's what we need to deal with. Next path, the listening one, where we both, well, the customer knows, but we don't. And that's how startups often originate. So the entrepreneur might be a frustrated customer. He sees opportunities that large established firms won't pursue and they're not satisfying them. So he said, well, I'll go out and do it myself. An interesting approach that we look at is already discovered, already mentioned in the literature. It's a very strong tradition in these fields. So there's the lead user approach, Erich von Hippel. Michael Porter's cluster model, the diamond model, has a one segment for sophisticated customers, strong demand. And Yves Dawes and others have looked at the metanational, strategic agility, being nimble. So what happens? Go to the frontier, find where someone is dealing with problems that are ahead of where the current market is. Find the lead users, the people who are maybe the geeks, certainly ahead of the rest. If you can satisfy them, then you can satisfy the rest of the market. And that's Michael Porter's story in the cluster model. For example, detect weak signals, but you need strong sensing mechanisms. That's an important part of the metanational strategic agility story that Yves Dawes presents. For example, how quickly do you resolve customer complaints? And do you work them into your offering? Complaints are an important learning opportunity, listening opportunity. Not many customers will complain or come back with a problem. Many would just go somewhere else. So treat that information as being very valuable. A banal example, once I was with a friend in a restaurant. This friend didn't like the food that came out, and he made the comment, he gave it to the waiter, and a few minutes later, straight away actually, the chef came out and he was so pleased, so happy to have heard that, because he'd been making that dish for a long time, not knowing the customers might have been dissatisfied. And there's also a question of professional pride, and he knew how he could improve it, how he could change it. Important listening and learning opportunity for us as a firm. Remember the quadrant in the top right-hand corner? The learning discovery path. Now, that's a fairly common one. Remember, that's where we, the firm, know of the benefits of our product, our service, but the customer doesn't appreciate them. So the challenge for the firm then is to educate the market and then to persuade them to use the product or service. That might occur fairly regularly in the case of new drugs, new medical procedures, but also new foods. Knowing about the benefits of, say, fermented foods, for example. The education needs to be there, and then the market needs to be persuaded maybe to behave differently in ways they're not used to. A brilliant example here is the Aeron office chair. It's a very famous chair in the design area, and it's become a museum piece, in fact. Now, that YouTube, it relates to a talk by Malcolm Gladwell. If you can't remember the YouTube URL, think of Malcolm Gladwell and Aeron office chair. In particular, he points out to the pitfalls of market research. He also goes into other examples, the Coca-Cola and other cases, where there's a problem, there's a disconnect between the parts of our brains, of the feelings and language, and it's not always easy to articulate what people want. So we need to deal with this. It's a challenge, but it can be dealt with. And this is the chair in itself. Now, the final quadrant is the one where nobody knows. Unknown by the consumers, unknown by the firm, and that was called the white discovery path. So unknown unknowns. They're very fluid situations. It's not clear how they might evolve and how we might discover these opportunities. Typically, it's because there are new technologies that can open new frontiers. These were things we weren't thinking about before the new technologies are approached. Just think about, for example, how retail banking has changed over the years. From having to go necessarily into a bank branch to having telephone banking, internet banking, mobile banking stores. We'll look at that in a second. Fintech. We've given you the example already of TransferWise. That's bringing a new approach to international transactions for consumer individuals. Now, the banking store, take a look at this example. Retail bank in the United States, Commerce Bank, operates only in certain states. Look at that. It opens on Saturdays. Now, that happens in several countries. It's not only the United States, but not everywhere. It suits their market. But delivery mode, interestingly, you can go into the lobby, but also they have a drive-through option. Drive-through, just like you'd go to buy fast food in some outlets. It suits their culture, it suits their customers, and why not? So what are the practical implications of this story? First of all, listening. If you can, if the knowledge is out there, listen. Observe how customers behave or use your product or other products. There are many ways of listening and observing, like there are different research methods. It's not only surveys, focus groups, or social media. For example, you could be a customer yourself. Go into the outlets, one of your shops, if you have many shops, experience the product, eat the product you make if it's a food product, wear the clothes you make, see how you feel. That in itself is a way of seeing how the customer interacts with your company. It's very good, useful if senior staff get involved, the CEO. Why is that? Get their hands dirty? Because it is psychologically valuable. It gives a signal to the junior staff. They see the commitment of the leadership. It helps build the culture. And then it's easier for the senior staff to absorb the lessons. Sometimes if we hear the lessons from lower down in the organization, it takes a lot longer for it to be accepted by the senior staff, by the leadership. This way, if they are directly involved in observing, dealing with the realities of our business, we can use this information much more easily and much more quickly.